First speaker of the afternoon, Marie Artim, Vice President, Talent Acquisition, Enterprise Holding. Marie is Vice President, Global Talent Acquisition, again for Enterprise Holding, supporting Enterprise, Alamo, and National Brand. I invite you to read the text, but probably just to point that Marie has conducted presentations and seminars in many universities and industry conferences, has been featured in national media outlets, including Business Week, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Good Morning America. So I would like to welcome Marie here to the stage to entertain us around the human resources aspect. So welcome here. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Patrice. Hi, everyone. Everybody loves the just after lunch spot, so I'm going to do my best with the time that we have to cover a wide variety of topics around the area of human resources. And even though my bio makes it sound like it, public speaking is not my actual day-to-day job, but it's a part of it. So I'll do my best to make sure that to entertain you, hopefully give you some information, a tidbit you can take back with you, a way to look at something a little differently along the way. So again, a very broad topic, and so over the next 30 minutes, what I'm hoping to do is just touch on some of those key components that really make up a talent strategy. I will give you the caveat that my experiences as a part of Enterprise go back 26 years. Please don't do the math, but I've been with the company for a very long time, so my experiences are tied to my experiences within the organization. So a lot of my examples or information might tie to what we've done, what we've learned, or what we're struggling with. But as we talked, and as I've talked with many of you, they're very transferable. So my hope is that you can see that, well, some of this might be specific or a little bit about how we did it. It certainly can apply to a number of different organizations and companies in the room. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. You all know who Enterprise is. The only reason I kept this slide in was that I think back to that 26 years ago, when I started with the company, there were 3 of these logos that were a part of our business. So for me, that's the context of what we've done and how we've grown, and what that means from a people perspective as we've gotten more complex and diverse as we've grown over the last couple of decades, the same as I think your industry and your businesses are doing today. So while we're still proud of being this big family-owned business, it also isn't so much about our brands, but about the people that are behind them and how you keep that going. We're also, of course, very proud of our decades here in the Canadian market. My favorite stat on this slide, of course, is the 5,400 employees that we have here. It's been really fun to watch us grow and to see all of the great people that we've been able to kind of bring up and through, and even meet some of you that are alumni of our programs here. So while stats and numbers are great, really what this is about is more than that. So we need all of those, but what we really need to focus on is who we are as a place to work and what we stand for. And so at Enterprise, we have a mission statement that really kind of speaks to that. It started from the beginning, and it's really about people and relationships, the community, the company, the employees that are with it. And that all came from our founder, Jack Taylor. And when he started the company, that was his goal. He wanted to make sure that we took care of customers and employees, and if you did that, profits would follow. And that still holds true today. So the idea of delighting customers and making sure that your employees were having fun and had opportunities is woven into the culture and the mission that we have. And because of that, we've recognized as an organization, and has been put on the shoulders of those of us in human resources, to know that, quite honestly, we're in the people business. So whenever your business is, it really comes down to the people you have, the people you bring on board, and then what you do to engage and develop them and to grow them in order for your business to be successful. So with that in mind, we're very fortunate in that we have a lot of support to support that people business. So things like recruiting and selecting the right people, that's where culture starts. That's where you start with your business, and it takes great people. And it can be very easy, as I've experienced, and I'm sure I know you all have too, when it's a tough spot, you're short-staffed, that you just want to find somebody to put in the seat so you can keep moving, that it's sometimes easy to make short-term decisions that maybe aren't best for long-term success. So recruiting and selecting is a key part of the overall people business that you can't just do when you feel like it or just wait till you need someone, but you have to be thinking about strategically in order to continue to grow. And then making sure that those people that you bring on board get what they were delivered on what they were promised. So whether it's learning and training, focusing on recognition and developing skills, holding your managers and your leaders accountable and giving them the tools in order to provide that ongoing engagement, and then focusing on development, whether that's local or national. So the way we look at that, and the way I kind of look at it, is this idea of a talent life cycle. So basically, a talent life cycle is thinking about someone from the time they're a candidate or potential employee through all of the employment stages they have with the company, all the way through retiree or alum of the business. And if you think about it, if you drop the ball on any of these pieces, it can have big consequences for your business, for your customers. And this talent life cycle is kind of always evolving based on what's happening in the world around us. So it's something we really have to stay focused on as we develop a strategy and then move it along, or it can become stagnant and less relevant. So to give you an example of that, what's happening outside today and what that means in the shifts of kind of how we look at people. So the first is no surprise, I don't think, to any of you, but if you look at the labor market, it's extremely strong. So low unemployment, talent is tough to get and tough to keep. So when you're in that environment and you know that it's probably not going to change anytime in the future, in the near future, what else plays into that? Why is that happening, and how do you address it? Well, looking at some other trends that kind of go with that I thought I would kind of bring up, and I don't think, again, any of these are going to be something you haven't thought of before, but important things to think about. We do have an aging workforce. We have a large population that is moving towards retirement, and with them taking a lot of skilled labor positions and making a shortage in those areas, because I'm preaching to the choir that we need more people to go into certain industries and into certain roles. And part of that is also the educational system, and what are the deficiencies that are there today that we can address, that we can help with, but knowing that right now we need to move people into some high demand roles, whether they be in the collision industry, which is a great example, whether they're high tech. There's a lot of areas where we know that as a workforce trend is happening. And then also there's this whole idea of free agent mentality. So the workplace is now a free agency. So I guess I would address that to say that I just said I've been with one company, many career paths, but one company for 26 years. Today the idea is more of it's acceptable to change jobs. It's no longer, you don't get labeled a job hopper. In fact, it's something that people kind of see and expect on a resume, versus I remember the days when we used to not select someone because of those things. And that free agent mentality is around what kind of feeds this thing called the gig economy that we're seeing. And that's the idea that I'm going to just do what's best for me today. So what can this place teach me? What skills can I learn? What can I do so that I'm more marketable and can make more money in the next role, whether that's within the same organization or in another one? And I'm going to be a free agent for myself. And that was driven by a lot of things that have happened in the past, but it really has impacted the way we see the workforce and the future of the workforce. And as we get through the generations, I think you'll see even a little bit more than that. So as we were talking and prepping for this, we talked a little bit about the idea of the generational changes in the workforce. So this one's kind of interesting. As you see, we are in a big shift as we look at the generations and what's happening with them. The workforce in 2020 will look very different than the workforce did a few years ago. And it's going to impact how we do business, what we do, and how we engage and hire, engage, and retain our employees. But there is a problem in that the baby boomer generation, which is the largest, as I mentioned before, will be retiring more, and there aren't enough people to fill that. So we know that that also equals a bit of a labor shortage. The other thing that's interesting as you look at this is, if you notice in 2020, there's a blue line that starts to come out, and that is Gen Z, or I think Gen Z, since I'm here. I'm not sure which one we're supposed to use, but I'm going to go with Gen Z. If I get it wrong, though, please don't hold it against me. Understanding that no matter what generation you fall into, we have 4 generations in the workforce, starting probably today and going forward. And what does that mean in how you work with each other, how you communicate, and then what does that mean when change comes around? Because everybody looks at it a little differently. And we could spend days on this subject alone, which I don't have, and you probably don't want me to, but I thought I would address just a couple of things around those different generations and some things to maybe think about within your organization, no matter which generation you fall in, and with the caveat that all of this research is always very generalized, so we do stereotype a bit as to who falls in what and what they're like, but there's enough research to show that overall, these things kind of hold true. So the first one is the baby boomers. So while they are retiring, there's still lots of them in the workforce, and they still have a significant impact. Our baby boomers are really, many of the leaders and subject matter experts that we have out there today. The knowledge transfer that has to happen from them to the next generations and to the next leaders is really important. But in general, generationally, baby boomers are also going to be your least comfortable with change of all the generations in the workforce today. So if you think about how you're communicating, some tips that may come with that is, especially in regards to change, is reminding them of the fact that it's been done before, great examples, what they were a part of, what the impact was. Very simple, not telling you anything you probably don't already know. The other piece is this is a generation that is shown to respect authority, to respect titles and hierarchy, something you don't necessarily see in some of the newer generations as much. I don't know if you see that in your workplace. We definitely do. I know, our Gen Y newer employees don't hesitate at all to want to pick up the phone and call our CEO to tell them their great idea on day 2. So, that's a little different than you would find if you came up in the workforce when we did, and you really respected that chain of command and what came next. So if they see that something's coming from someone important, or that it is important to someone they see and value their respect their opinion of, they're more likely to adapt to change. So again, just a couple of things to think about when it comes to communicating with that generation. Next up, Gen X, my generation. We're small, but we're mighty. And when you think about Gen X, it's a little different. They're more worried about how they'll fare. So it's more about, your style with Gen X should really be about making them be and look good. It's not as much about what somebody else thinks, but kind of a what's in it for me, and how do I shine as an employee. And so as you're thinking about that, from whether it's change or management styles, it's an important thing to be kind of mindful of, depending on what area you're coming from. Then I'm going to get to the one that gets a lot of conversation right now, and that's the millennials. They are, as you saw on the chart, the largest part of the workforce today, and they're growing. So they have their own needs and wants to consider. They've been in the workforce for quite a while, and many of us have started to figure out how we adapt our workplace to some of the changing needs and wants, or to figure out how we manage through this generation. So again, there's lots on it. A couple key things that I thought I would touch on that we know that kind of differentiate this generation. One is they really do want to make a difference. So they want to work they look for brands that make a difference, and they want to work in places where they feel like they have an impact, where they can give back in some way, where the organization supports that. So you're seeing a lot more of that if you look at how we relate to our employees, the things we do in the community. A very important part of it. They also thrive on collaboration. Remember, this is the generation of the everybody gets a trophy, ribbons for participation, 15th place is good, that's all good, this is the generation that's about that. So they love a team, they love to collaborate, they don't really like getting out there and being in front. We've seen that in our workplace. I'm sure that some of you have experienced that as well, again, generalizing. But how do you take that and say, we really need some competition. We need some competitive behind that collaboration. So the team's great, but how do you stand out? And how do you make that part of your workforce? And then there's this whole idea of flexibility, which is probably the biggest one. And that falls in a couple of different buckets for me. So if you think about flexibility, it's not just defined as working from home, although that is part of it, but it's working where I want or when I want. It could be working on projects that I have a passion for. It could be feeling like I have an impact. It could be just, most importantly, we find working with people I enjoy and want to be around, because back to that kind of team group, I don't know about you, but all my friends' kids they go to dances in packs. Like I used to get a date to go to the dance and you had 2 people and now it's 20 people because it's a collaborative thing. So how do you take that? And the flexibility side, they want to feel that too. So, we as an organization, for example, we rent cars, we have customers, we have to be face-to-face. So it's not possible to be at home in your bunny slippers. So how do we address that flexibility? And that's something we've been really trying to tackle over the last decade. Another aspect of that is this whole gig economy thing. So the idea of the free agency and the flexibility that goes with, I'm going to do this for a little while, I'm going to try it out, and then I'm going to go off and do that. So I would say we used to look at the career path of people as a ladder. You always think of a corporate ladder, and now people look at their career experiences more as a lattice. So where can I go? It might be across or backwards or down, but I'm going to learn something new, work with new people, try something different. So that idea of flexibility is there too. So millennials definitely have a few things we can learn from. So the last one is Gen Z. That's who's next. As you can see, they're sort of new into the workforce, but for a North American standard, quite big in numbers. And I think the key things that we know so far, they're still kind of early research, but they're a little promising, at least we hope. The first is that they're true digital natives. So they have been connected since birth. They expect transparency. They are used to being able to go and look and find and see anything they want without the cover of your PR, tightening it up, or without it just being something that comes in a book. So it's an interesting generation from that perspective. Also, some of the good news, they look to be more competitive. They're less about the everybody gets a trophy and more work to make the team. They are more hardworking and money motivated. They've kind of come of age through some tumultuous times and saw the impact on their families. So, they're a little more realistic and less entitled, at least we hope. So fingers crossed on that one. And they do want a personalized work experience. Think about it. Everything they've done is personalized. The way they shop, the way they order food and eat, the way they attend school, everything is personalized to them. So they look for a work experience for that too. And that could be that gig or those side hustles that everybody's talking about. It could be just being able to map out my career or my next steps or what I'm going to learn. But something that I think we all need to think about as we address our workforce that's coming into the workforce and is going to grow in the next 5+ years. So this is, again, just a quick look at the generations and thinking about how they interact with each other and what we should think about with that. But if you think about how you communicate or manage them, we also have to think about, what we do to attract them. So for me, I always start with this. I'm a big believer of the idea of the employee value proposition. It's really marketing speak, but it's the idea of digging down within your company or your organization and spending some time figuring out what differentiates us as an employer. What do we have to offer that's important to the people that we're trying to hire? And how do we bring that forward in the way we recruit and then the way we engage and retain our employees? So the idea of an employee value proposition doesn't need to be something you go to a marketing firm and spend a lot of money on. It might just be some homework on your own or some self-reflection with your teams to really dig in and see what do we stand for and what are the things that make us different? What's the things that make our employees great and make them want to be a part of our team? And so it's just the most important thing is it has to be authentic to work. So you can't kind of come up with, we have the most flexible, wonderful work environment when you don't. It has to really be true to you. So maybe a better visual for that might be if I shared a little of what we came up with. So as we've done that homework and we've really kind of looked at what are those attributes that our employees tell us and that we can deliver on that make us us. So if those are the values, they're telling our best story. So when we're thinking of recruitment or how we speak to people or how we develop people, we try to keep in mind that these are the key things that are about our story, that we have to not only get them to us that way, but then we have to deliver once they're there. So I guess another way to kind of look at that would be this idea. So if you know the enterprise brand, we have a management training program. It's where I started, a lot of people started. It's an entry-level management program. And so if you think about it, as my mother liked to point out when I was interviewing with Enterprise many years ago, I didn't send you to university to rent cars. So we have that we're up against that most of the time as we look at that position in that program. So how do we sell that? How do we get beyond that? We use those attributes, that value proposition, to understand that what we don't need to do is sell that we're, pictures of cars or keys or driving, which is what everybody kind of does in our industry and what we did for a while too. But instead, let's tell the best story of us. And that's things like opportunity and culture and transparency and a work environment and all those things that we know we can deliver on that are going to be important to the people we're trying to hire. So that's a quick example of that, but hopefully just kind of gives you an idea of what that means and why it's important to kind of do that homework to understand when you're hiring. And then that might be how we attract people to roles, but then the other side of it is we also have to make sure the people we attract are the people we want to hire. So how do we then figure out the right talent? So another example that I thought might help is, we as a company, and I highly encourage it, have taken a step back from saying you need to have this many years of experience from this company or that company or this type of job in order to be successful in this new job. But instead, what are the skills, the attributes, the competencies that really make you good at your job? And it allows you to, one, open the funnel of who might be your pool of talented people. It also allows you to look at people's skills and backgrounds a little differently and with a little maybe less bias, which kind of falls into most any interview process. So an example of that would be the rental sales agent. This is a position that is part of our National and Alamo brands. And so when we brought those brands on board and looked at that position, we found that their traditional hiring was to go to another car rental company and to hire people who already did that job. And that was the pool for this position. So after we did our homework and we went and we looked at what are the skills or the competencies that are really important in being successful at this job, we found that they don't have to come from a certain company or even have a certain title to their last job, but these are the things we need to look for in the people that are going to be successful. And so now we found that we don't necessarily hire from other companies in the industry, but instead we found these people really come more from telecom sales, retail, different consumer electronic sales. So it's an aha moment, and it's a way for us to now have a bigger or broader pool from which to pull for ourselves. So, but I guess next is we have to find them, right? So we can sell them all we want, and we can evaluate them, but how do we get them to us? How do you find your people today? So this is tough to do in a room like this, but anybody know, you can just shout it out, what the #1 job board is today? No? Google. So Google is it is the place to search for jobs. No one now goes to this site or that site. Almost everyone starts their job searches by going to Google and typing in collision repair jobs in whatever city. And if you look at it, I did a little homework and just typed a few things in. 30% of all searches on Google are employment related, which, just to give you a number, is 300 million searches a month on Google are employment related. So that is where people are starting their job searches. So what does that mean to you? Well, if you see, I did a couple of searches. There's huge numbers of postings and jobs available in your industry, which I'm not, again, telling you anything you don't know and how competitive it is. So how do you make sure yours is one of those? Or how do you make sure that you're part of that set when somebody is doing that searching? Again, you don't have to hire an agency and spend lots of money, but give some thought to go out and search for jobs in your area for the type of people you're trying to hire. Do a Google search. What pops up? What companies? What other organizations? What job boards? What other posting sites that you could be using to get your jobs advertised? That's going to give you a bit of an idea of who your competition is, how they're describing the job, what they're using to make them more relevant to the candidate, and something called search engine optimization, which is something I think we use on the consumer side or the business side a lot, plays just as much into the recruiting side. So, you can also, I think you can learn a lot from just doing a quick Google search and then working with some people, whether it's in HR or recruitment, to help you to figure out what that means as far as where do I go next and how do I find the people I want. So outside of the actual job search side, there's another reality today that I kind of mentioned already, and that's transparency. There's a need for it, there's an expectation of it, and now it's there in the world of work. So I don't know, how many of you are familiar with the site Glassdoor? Anybody? Okay, some hands. If you're not, you might want to become familiar with it because it is now the leading site of employment or company reviews. So think of it as the TripAdvisor of the Yelp for the job industry. And it is growing like crazy. I just had a meeting with our account manager that we work with for North America, and she shared that Canada is one of their fastest growing markets. So I would highly encourage you to go on Glassdoor and look up your company and see what it looks like. It's basically going to give you, ratings in different aspects of what it's like to work there, from culture, comp and benefits, the rating your leadership, your owner or CEO. So there's a lot of different things it tells you about your business. It gives you a good feel for what's authentic about what you're doing well or what you could do better. And it's important not only because it's out there and it's transparent, but people are looking at it. We were able to do a study, and we tracked that 70% of the people that apply to our jobs touch Glassdoor prior to applying, or at some point during the apply process. So they're looking at that as a source of research, but it also tells your story as a brand. It also helps you to better your story as a company. So just something to be aware of. And again, another place, you can also post jobs on there. We do hire people from Glassdoor, quite a bit of them, in fact. But it is another area, and they're really good at search engine optimization. So if I were to type in enterprise jobs in Toronto, it's very likely that a Glassdoor page about enterprise in Toronto would come up for people to take a look at our company and our reviews. So think about it that way as well. So back to that talent life cycle. I've talked a lot about the selection side of it and kind of the front end, and can't tell you how important all that is as we went through whether it's recruitment marketing, transparency, the value proposition and trends. But there's a lot more to that cycle. So one I'm not going to touch a ton on today, but that's important is that onboarding piece. It's kind of, to me, the baton handoff between selection and development and retention and engagement. And it's so important. When you think of that hiring decision, especially if you're making good ones, you want to make sure that that's somebody who's is delivered on what you were promised. What is their experience as soon as they say yes? What is it up to the time that they start their first day? What does their first day, their first week, their first month look like? How are they communicated with? What expectations are set? If you don't have a plan or a strategy in place for onboarding, it's a huge component of retention. We've found that if the more that you have an actual plan and structure in place for your new employees to come on board and in their first 3 months, the better that structure, the better your overall retention with that employee base. And we measure that. It's actually a measurement of my team in recruitment. So, but moving on from that in that talent life cycle and on to the kind of the training and development piece. So if you think about training, it's a popular term. We all use training. We train people. We're going to be trained. We need to train people on this. We need to get the training done. We need to build new training. All of us in all of our businesses use it all the time. And, I would challenge you that maybe we need to think of it a little bit differently. And this is what I mean. So if instead of thinking of training as the end all, think of training as kind of your toolkit. It's your toolbox. And then development is practice building those tools. So I'll give you an example that I like. I don't golf, so this might not make total sense to those of you who do, but say I decided I want to be an excellent golfer. I'm going to win tournaments. I used to say I'd get in the PGA. People told me that's probably not accurate. So, but I'm going to win tournaments. I'm going to be a great golfer. So if I go to golf class for a day, I don't leave it being that golfer I want to be winning tournaments. It's going to take training, but it's also going to take coaching and feedback and lots of practice, and then all the things that kind of bring that together. So it's just an interesting way to look at it is to say, we often give someone a job, so we want you to be good at sales, so we're going to send you to sales training for a day, and you're going to leave being a great salesperson. But that's not probably the best way to go about it. If you use that same analogy, you have to also then have a plan to develop that, to practice it, to coach it, and to bring people through it so that they get better at it over time. So I'm going to talk a bit about coaching and mentoring in a second, but also important, as you heard me say about especially millennials and Gen Z, The idea of that gig economy, that new things, that lattice versus ladder, means that new assignments, job rotations, ways to mix it up, to make people feel like they're learning something new, doing something different, trying a new skill. All of those are so important as we move forward generationally, that if you don't have that built into your development plans, into the way you engage in your employees, try to find ways to do it. It doesn't have to be about promotions or management or anything like that, but we found that anytime you can give someone an additional responsibility or a skill set or something that makes them feel like they are learning and doing something new, especially in the newer generations, that's really important to them. So another key of that is that coaching piece. And for us, and I would think, kind of again, it makes a lot of sense, coaching is really about that direct manager, that line manager. And a couple of things, we do it because we have a need. I think everyone does, but the manager is kind of in the learning by doing stage, but it's important that you set your managers up for success. Are you giving them the development or the training themselves to be good at it? Are you giving them the tools or the resources? We have things like roadmaps and checklists that allow our managers to kind of stay on course with their new employees so that they know what's expected of them. They stay on course to make sure people are learning and doing and developing in the ways that they should be. And then we really set expectations. So does your manager know what it means to be successful? Does your manager really know what it means for your employee to be doing what they should be doing? Do we have expectations set? So one of the things, we might have one-on-one meetings and those checklists, but we also evaluate managers on how they develop their people. So it's a way of setting an expectation that it's on you to make sure these folks that work for you are doing great. And by holding them to that, it really does make a difference. Mentoring, our formal mentor program I have up here, but it's really, that for us was something, again, to kind of focus on a need. So it is something we use with a small portion of our workforce where we found that we had the biggest challenge in retention, and so we wanted to put some extra effort into it. But really, I think the informal side of it is what everyone needs. But bringing mentorship and encouraging mentoring within your organization, making sure from day one of a new employee's onboarding, they know that it's encouraged for them to find mentors, that we're encouraging our managers and leaders to reach out and to be open to becoming mentors so that you're not just looking to a line manager for your only source. And making sure, again, it's part of a strategy. Every time someone's in for training, when they're getting a review, are we talking about the idea of, do you have any mentors? How can I help you? What are things you'd like to be working on? I can maybe connect you with someone who can help you with that. So, it takes not a lot of work to have a lot of impact. And then ultimately, I think when you look at this part of the talent life cycle and the whole idea of development and coaching and training and all of those pieces, why we do this, why we care about this piece is not, is about engaging employees and it's about retaining, but it's really because engaged employees perform. So the better we do all these things, the better our performance, which is really what we're all in it for. Employee performance is going to drive better service, better sales, better retention. So training isn't your goal, development isn't your goal, performance is, but they need to tie together. And to do that, I think that one of the most important things we found is that you have to find ways to measure and motivate. So think about those employees that we have and what's important to them. All those things we talked about that might be different for different people, but how do we measure and motivate? So friendly competition is a great way to do it. Not that like I'm going to push you away so I can win, but how do we do it all together and recognize that the team is great, but also individuals so that there's that friendly competition to all be better. And cultivating a culture of that is really important. Having some key metrics that you measure that are consistent and trying to keep it simple. I think we all suffer from that. We want to measure all kinds of things about our business and about the individuals doing it, and it gets so convoluted with so many metrics that you lose sight of what's really important or are you hitting those or not. So trying to keep it simple and being transparent about it. Does everybody get to see how they're doing against their peers? What it takes to get to the next level, what it takes to be successful, what it takes to get a raise, whatever that's important to them, is there transparency so that they feel like they're being treated fairly and they're a part of a team to do more. They're going to perform better. And finally, the focus has to be measurement that impacts the business. The idea that we do these things for the good of the business and it's not just an HR thing. A lot of times this gets pushed to, well, this is engagement, this is development, this is an HR thing. It needs to be a business thing that HR helps to support. And that's been really key as we've moved ahead. And to bring it back to that EVP that I talked about earlier, that value proposition, the performance for us has to be in balance. So what do we deliver on? What are we good at? And then how does that balance so that we're doing it and differentiating it? So we talk about 4 legs of the stool. To be successful with an enterprise, you have to be able to balance all of these areas. You can't just be great at profits and bad at people and be recognized or rewarded or promoted. And it's the manager's responsibility and it's the expectation of leadership. And the tough part is holding true to that even when it's not easy. It's so much easier sometimes to make the exception because of a circumstance, to let somebody move ahead even if they aren't in balance, because you want to support good behavior, good performance in different ways. But it's a lesson that we learned that's really treated us well. So here's an example of that. So our service quality index is our customer service measure, and it came about many years ago, but it took a while to develop, and it really came out of the need for employees to take ownership of customer satisfaction. So back to kind of tying those two things together. And it was developed when we were growing really rapidly, and senior leadership was hearing about customer experiences that weren't where they wanted them or needed them to be. And so they put in place this SQI, this top box measurement of satisfaction. I'm sure many of you have heard of it before. But the key is that when it came out, there were a lot of excuses about why this wasn't accurate, and people in small towns are going to get higher scores than those of us who run big cities because people are nicer there, or all kinds of things. But what we learned was that we had to set an expectation that performance mattered in this level and this balance piece more than anything. So simply measuring it wasn't enough. So we had to connect the two parts of the business to this time-tested kind of business model we talked about, a strong link between customer satisfaction and the promise to reward employees. So how that looks is we took those 4 legs of the stool, that balance, and applied our culture and what we're about and said, customer service is one of those legs, and if you don't have that, none of the recognition or reward or promotability, if that's the case, is available to you. And now it kind of tied those other measures to be just as important, and it tied our employees' work every day to what was important to them in the future. So to give you an example of it, we had a general manager who is our vice president of GMs, which is a pretty high role, who was interviewing for a position at our headquarters. And he was at the airport getting ready to board the plane, and the numbers for customer service came out, and he had fallen below the corporate average, which is our bar. And he was called at the airport and said, "Don't get on the plane. You're no longer eligible." He was the #1 person for the job. Everyone thought that's who would get it. And leadership decided they weren't going to make that exception for this dip in his customer service because we set the example and the expectation that you have to be there. So I think those are the tough decisions that come with business as you do these things, is how do you tie it to the business, but also make sure you stick with it. The other example I would give you really quickly, that it's something you can weave into your culture and you can bring forward, is when we purchased Alamo and National, this is where we sat in J.D. Power, so customer service rankings. And very different cultures, different employees, different ways of doing business, different customers. We implemented SQI into those businesses and really set the same expectations and the same requirements for success. And fortunately, it paid off. So we have spent 5 years in a row in the top 3 spots, and we've really focused on making sure that no matter who our customer or brand, our employees are still delivering with that same level of execution. So finally, I covered a lot, and I know that I kind of scratched the surface, and our team's around. If you want to follow up on any of this, I'm happy to do so. But I think the things to walk away with is just, make sure that you remain relevant to the audience. So you saw there's a lot of different audiences and changes that are going on. How do you stay relevant to that? How do you making sure you stay true to your culture and focus on your people no matter what's going on? And that there's consistent execution towards your goals. Again, that's the hardest part. Even when it's not easy, how do you make sure that you're consistent in the execution, that you're flexible and you're adaptable as you move forward? But So great to share some information with you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you again for having me. Oops. Thank you.